The mountains of Montana had a way of swallowing sound. In the dead of winter, when the temperature plunged to 30 below and the wind came howling down from the peaks like a living thing, the silence between gusts was so profound it hurt the ears. It was in this brutal, beautiful emptiness that Commander Jake Mercer sought his peace. Jake was a Navy SEAL, though he wore no uniform now. At 38, his body was a map of service, lean and hard, with shoulders that carried the weight of too many missions and eyes that had seen too much. His face was weathered, angular, with a strong jaw shadowed by a week's worth of stubble. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. He moved through the world with an economy of motion that spoke of years spent in places where a single wasted movement could mean death. He was on mandatory leave, the kind the Navy insisted on after what his file euphemistically called a high-stress operational tempo. The truth was simpler and harder. He'd lost 2 men in Kandahar, good men, brothers, and the silence of the Hindu Kush had been replaced by the screaming in his head. So he'd come here, to the Bitterroot Range, to a landscape so harsh and indifferent it demanded his full attention just to survive. There was no room for ghosts when you were fighting the mountain. His cabin was a fortress of necessity. Built by a paranoid survivalist in the 70s, it was all thick logs, reinforced steel shutters, and a wood stove that could heat the place through a nuclear winter. Jake had rented it under a name that wasn't quite his, through a contact who knew better than to ask questions. It sat at the end of a logging road that hadn't seen maintenance in a decade, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor, 10 from the nearest town. Perfect. At his feet, watching him with the patient intensity that only a working dog possessed, lay Odin. Odin was a Belgian Malinois, 90 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. His coat was a rich fawn color, his face masked in black, and his eyes were the color of dark amber. He wasn't a pet. He was a partner, a brother in arms who had served alongside Jake in places that didn't officially exist. Odin had pulled wounded men from collapsed buildings, detected IEDs buried in roads, and once, in a firefight outside Mosul, had taken down an insurgent who'd gotten inside their perimeter. The dog had saved Jake's life more times than either of them could count. Now they were both off duty, both trying to remember what peace felt like. Jake sat in a heavy oak chair, methodically cleaning his sidearm. The movements were automatic, meditative. Strip, wipe, oil, reassemble. The ritual was calming, a connection to order in a world that increasingly felt chaotic. Outside, the wind was beginning to pick up. The weather report he'd checked that morning had been grim. A major storm system was rolling in from the northwest, promising to dump 3 feet of snow and bring winds that would turn the world into a white hell. He'd chopped enough wood to last a week. His pantry was stocked. His generator was fueled. He was ready. Odin's head suddenly snapped up from where it had been resting on his paws. His ears, which had been relaxed, went rigid, swiveling forward. A low sound rumbled in his chest, not quite a growl, but a signal of alert that Jake had learned to trust more than any piece of electronic surveillance equipment. "What is it, boy?" Jake's voice was low, calm, his hand stilled on the weapon. The dog stood, his body language shifting from rest to tactical awareness in an instant. He moved to the heavy front door, his nose working, pulling in scent through the gap at the bottom. Then he did something that made Jake's pulse quicken. Odin barked. It was a sharp, commanding sound that cut through the rising wind outside. It was the bark that meant danger, urgency, mission. Jake set the pistol down and stood. In this location, miles from civilization with a storm bearing down, there should be nothing out there. No hikers, no lost tourists, no neighbors checking in. Whatever had triggered Odin's alert was wrong. He moved to his gear locker and began to dress with practiced efficiency. Thermal base layers, heavy-duty snow pants, insulated boots rated to -40. He pulled on a waterproof shell jacket lined with fleece, secured a tactical belt with a fixed-blade knife, a high-lumen flashlight, and a compact trauma kit. He grabbed his thermal monocular and slung his rifle, a civilian AR-15, across his back. Not because he expected to need it, but because in his world, preparation wasn't paranoia. It was survival. "Show me," he said. Odin was already at the door, his entire body vibrating with contained energy. Jake opened the door, and the storm tried to force its way inside. The wind was a physical thing, a wall of frozen air that stole his breath. The snow wasn't falling so much as flying horizontally, a blinding sheet of white that reduced visibility to almost nothing. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last hour. Odin plunged into the drift without hesitation. His thick double coat was built for this, and he moved through the deep snow with powerful, lunging strides. Jake followed, leaning into the wind, every step a small battle. The cold was immediate and brutal, finding any gap in his clothing and exploiting it. "Lead," Jake commanded, his voice nearly lost in the howl. The dog moved with purpose, heading away from the cabin, past the woodshed, toward a steep embankment that dropped down toward a frozen creek bed. Jake raised his thermal monocular, scanning the landscape. Through the lens, the world became shades of gray and black. The snow was cold, the trees were cold. He swept the area methodically, searching for any heat signature that didn't belong. Nothing. But Odin was insistent. The dog scrambled down the embankment, his powerful legs churning through the snow, stopping every few yards to look back and make sure Jake was following. They descended into the ravine, the wind slightly muted by the terrain, but the cold even more intense in the low area where the air settled. It took 15 brutal minutes before Odin stopped dead at the edge of a deep drift. He barked, the sound frantic, echoing off the walls of the ravine. He began to dig, his paws throwing snow in great arcing sprays. Jake moved to his side, shining his flashlight beam into the swirling snow. At first he saw nothing but white. Then the beam caught something dark, angular, wrong. He dropped to his knees and began to dig with his gloved hands, working alongside Odin. The shape revealed itself slowly. It was a vehicle. An SUV, dark blue, nose down in the drift, partially buried. Jake cleared more snow from the side panel, and his blood ran cold. Even through the ice and packed snow, he could make out the faded insignia, Glacier County Sheriff's Department. This was no lost tourist. This was law enforcement. "Odin, secure," he ordered. The Wade dog immediately took up a watchful position, his ears swiveling, scanning for threats. Jake approached the vehicle with tactical caution. The driver's side window was shattered, the glass scattered across the snow like diamonds. He cleared away more snow and ice, his flashlight cutting through the darkness inside. A woman was slumped against the steering wheel. She wore the dark uniform of a deputy sheriff, her jacket torn, her face pale with cold and streaked with frozen blood from a gash across her forehead. Jake reached through the broken window, his fingers pressing against the side of her neck, searching for the pulse point. There. Faint, thready, but present. She was alive. As he assessed her condition, his flashlight beam swept across her wrists and his jaw clenched. Her hands were secured behind her back, bound with heavy-duty zip ties that had cut into her skin. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Someone had done this to her. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the wind. A high-pitched whine, desperate and weak. Jake shifted his position, shining his light into the back of the SUV. The rear cargo area contained 3 transport crates, the kind used for animals. In the closest crate, he could see movement. He wrenched open the rear hatch, the frozen metal screaming in protest. 3 German Shepherd puppies huddled together in the crate, their small bodies shaking violently. They couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old, all oversized paws and soft fur now matted with melting snow that had blown in through gaps in the wreckage. Their eyes were barely open, their breathing shallow. One of them, the smallest, lifted its head weakly when the light hit them, let out a single pitiful whine, and collapsed back onto its siblings. They were dying. "No," Jake said, the word a command to the universe itself. "Not today." He unzipped his heavy jacket and carefully scooped the 3 tiny freezing bodies out of the crate. They were so light it terrified him, their ribs visible beneath their thin coats. He tucked all 3 inside his jacket against his chest, zipping it back up to trap his body heat around them. They squirmed weakly, their small hearts racing against his skin. He returned to the driver's side. The woman was unconscious, hypothermic, and restrained. He had to get her out, but the zip ties were a problem. He dug through the snow around the vehicle until he found her duty belt, partially buried. He located a small folding knife and used it to saw through the thick plastic binding her wrists. The ties fell away, revealing raw, chafed skin beneath. Jake braced himself, found his footing in the deep snow, and carefully extracted her from the vehicle. She was small, maybe 5'5", but dead weight was always heavy. He positioned her across his shoulders in a fireman's carry, her body limp and cold. With the puppies shifting against his chest and the deputy across his shoulders, Jake looked up at 8. The steep embankment. It might as well have been Everest. "Odin, home!" he shouted into the wind. The Malinois barked once, a sharp acknowledgment, and began to chart a path back up the slope. Jake followed, his legs burning, his lungs aching from the frozen air. Every step was a negotiation with gravity and exhaustion. The puppies were terrifyingly still against his chest. The woman's breathing was so shallow he could barely feel it. He focused on Odin's dark shape ahead, moving with the same relentless determination that had carried him through missions in the Korangal Valley and the streets of Ramadi, one foot in front of the other. Just move. Don't think. Just move. The cabin appeared like a mirage through the white chaos. Jake kicked the door open, stumbled inside, and was hit by the blast of dry heat from the wood stove. He didn't pause. He gently laid the woman down on the thick bearskin rug in front of the fire. Then he unzipped his jacket and pulled out the 3 puppies. They were so cold. Their tiny bodies were like ice. He grabbed clean towels from a cabinet, warming them near the fire for a few seconds, then began to vigorously dry the puppies, rubbing their fur to stimulate circulation. They barely moved. Odin, his own coat covered in ice and snow, approached and nudged the smallest pup with his nose, whining softly, a sound of canine concern that Jake had rarely heard from the normally stoic war dog. Jake created a makeshift nest using a wooden crate lined with warm towels, placing it near the stove but not too close. He put the 3 puppies inside and covered them with another layer of towels. Then he turned his attention to the woman. She was soaked, her uniform frozen. Hypothermia was the immediate threat. He grabbed trauma shears from his medical kit and began cutting away the wet layers of clothing, working quickly but carefully. As he removed her jacket and shirt, he saw the full extent of what had been done to her. The head wound was bad, but it could have been from the crash. What stopped him cold were the bruises. A constellation of dark purple marks shadowed her jaw and throat. Her ribs bore the telltale circular imprints of repeated blunt force trauma, some fresh, some older, and yellowing. Someone had beaten her systematically before putting her in that vehicle. This was attempted murder. Jake pushed the rage down into the cold, locked box where he kept such things and focused on medicine. He checked for broken bones, finding none, though she'd be in agony when she woke. He cleaned the head wound, applied butterfly closures to hold it together, and covered it with a sterile dressing. He wrapped her in dry wool blankets and a space blanket, creating a cocoon of warmth. With both the woman and the puppies stabilized for the moment, Jake stood and took stock. The storm was still raging outside, a white wall that would keep them isolated for at least another day, maybe 2. Whoever had done this probably thought the storm would erase the evidence, bury their crime under 10 feet of snow. They were wrong. Jake fed another log into the stove and settled into his chair. Odin took up position between the unconscious woman and the crate of puppies, a silent guardian watching over the newest members of their temporary pack. The war, it seemed, had followed Jake to the mountains after all. The warmth returned in waves. It started as a distant sensation, like something remembered from a dream, then grew stronger, more insistent, dragging Deputy Rachel Morgan back toward consciousness. With the warmth came pain. Her head throbbed with a deep, nauseating pulse. Her ribs screamed with every shallow breath. Her throat felt raw, bruised from the inside. The memories came in fragments. The radio call. The remote service road. The figure stepping out from behind the snowbank, the first impact of a fist against her jaw. The cold, methodical way he'd searched her vehicle. The puppies crying in the back. The feeling of being pushed, the world tilting, the crunch of metal and glass, Rachel's eyes snapped open. She was staring up at a rough-hewn log ceiling, illuminated by the flickering orange light of a fire. This wasn't the hospital. This wasn't her home. This was somewhere else entirely. Panic flared, hot and immediate, overriding the pain. She tried to sit up, and agony lanced through her ribs, forcing her back down with a sharp gasp. A voice spoke from nearby, calm and deep. "Easy. Don't move too fast." Rachel turned her head, ignoring the protest from her neck. A man sat in a chair a few feet away. He was large, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and eyes that were startlingly alert and blue. He looked like he belonged in these mountains, all rugged competence and quiet intensity. He didn't move, just watched her with the same careful attention a predator might give potential prey. Beside him, the largest dog Rachel had ever seen stood up. It was a Belgian Malinois. She recognized the breed from training, but this one was different. It moved with a controlled precision that spoke of serious military work. A low growl rumbled in its chest. "Where am I? Who are you?" Rachel's voice came out as a croak, raw and painful. "You're safe," the man said. His hands remained visible, resting on the arms of the chair. "My name is Jake Mercer. You're in my cabin. I found you in the storm." The storm, the vehicle in the ravine, the cold. "The puppies," Rachel gasped, trying to push herself up again. "My puppies? Where are—" "They're here," Jake interrupted gently, nodding toward the hearth. "They're warm." Rachel's gaze followed his gesture. She saw the wooden crate lined with towels. She saw Odin lying beside it like a sentinel, his large head resting near the edge, his eyes soft as he watched the small forms inside. As if sensing her attention, one of the puppies let out a tiny yip. "They're alive?" The question came out as a sob. "All three," Jake confirmed. "Cold, weak, but fighting. My dog's been watching them." Relief flooded through Rachel so intensely it hurt worse than the bruises. She let herself collapse back against the cushions, tears streaming down her cheeks, freezing on her skin. The puppies were alive. She was alive. "You found me?" she whispered, trying to piece together what had happened. "In the ravine." "How did you—" "Odin heard something that didn't belong," Jake said, his tone matter-of-fact. "We investigated, found your vehicle buried in the snow. You were hypothermic, unconscious. You have a head wound." He paused, his blue eyes sharpening. "And you were restrained." The way he said that last word made it clear he understood exactly what it meant. Rachel's hand automatically went to her wrists, feeling the raw, chafed skin where the zip ties had cut into her. The memory crashed over her like a wave. His face, his cold, methodical violence. His calm assurance that the storm would hide what he'd done. "He left me to die," Rachel said, her voice hollow. "Marcus. Lieutenant Marcus Cole. He's my commanding officer." Her voice broke. Jake leaned forward slightly, his expression neutral but his attention absolute. "Tell me." And Rachel did. The words tumbled out, a confession to this stranger who had saved her life. She told him about Lieutenant Marcus Cole, the golden boy of the Glacier County Sheriff's Department. Handsome, charming, a decorated veteran who had brought federal grant money and modern tactics to their small department. Everyone loved him. The mayor, the county commissioners, the other deputies. He was being groomed for sheriff when the current one retired. He was also running a smuggling operation. "I found it by accident," Rachel explained, her voice shaking. "Discrepancies in our evidence logs. Drugs that should have been logged into evidence were disappearing. I started looking into it quietly. I found shipping manifests, wire transfers, encrypted communications. He was using our patrol routes, our evidence system, to move product. It was brilliant and disgusting." "You confronted him?" Jake asked. "No, I was smarter than that. I copied everything to a secure drive. I was going to take it to the state police, to internal affairs. But Marcus must have suspected something. He called me this morning, said there was a situation on the old mining road, asked me to meet him. I should have known better." She touched her jaw, wincing at the tender flesh. "The moment I got there, he didn't even pretend. He just attacked." Jake's face remained calm, but his eyes had gone cold. "The puppies?" "They're mine." From my retired K9, Luna. I was transporting them to my sister's place. Off the books, just a family thing. Marcus knew that. He tore the vehicle apart looking for the drive. He kept screaming at me, "Where is it? Where did you hide it?" When he couldn't find it, she stopped, the memory too fresh, too brutal. He decided to tie up a loose end. Jake. Finished for her. Rachel nodded. He zip-tied my hands, shoved the vehicle toward the embankment. I remember him looking at the puppies in the back and smiling. He said, "The storm will clean up the mess." Then I was falling. The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, the wind continued its assault on the cabin. Inside, the fire crackled, and the puppies made small, sleepy sounds. "He thinks you're dead," Jake said finally. It wasn't a question. "He has to," Rachel replied. "The storm was supposed to bury the evidence. Bury me. When it clears, he'll lead the search and rescue himself. He'll find the wreck, confirm I'm gone, and close the case. Tragic accident in a blizzard. Unstable deputy, recent stress, lost control of her vehicle." Jake stood and walked to the window, peering out into the white chaos. "When will he come?" "When the storm breaks," Rachel said. "Maybe a day, maybe two. He'll use official channels, bring a search team, make it look good." "And the drive?" Jake asked, turning back to her. "Did he find it?" For the first time since waking, Rachel felt a small, fierce spark of satisfaction. "No." "Where is it?" "Where?" Rachel carefully pushed herself up to a sitting position, ignoring the protest from her ribs. She looked at the crate where the 3 puppies slept, watched over by the vigilant Malinois. "He searched me. He searched the vehicle. He tore apart every compartment, every panel." She looked at Jake, and a grim smile touched her bruised lips. "But he never searched them." Understanding dawned in Jake's eyes. "The puppies," Rachel nodded. "Their collars. I sewed a waterproof pouch into the lining of the smallest one's collar. The drive is micro, no bigger than my fingernail." Marcus was looking for a hard drive, something physical. He never even considered the dogs were anything more than collateral damage. Jake crossed the room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside the crate and gently lifted the smallest puppy, a female with soft brown eyes and oversized paws. The pup squirmed and yawned, showing tiny milk teeth. He carefully examined the bright red collar around her neck. There, almost invisible against the nylon, was a small, expertly sewn seam. Jake looked up at Rachel, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. It was a warrior's smile, cold and approving. "He's not just sloppy," Jake said. "He's an amateur." "And you're not," Rachel observed, studying him more carefully now. The way he moved, the tactical precision of his speech, the scars she could see on his hands. "Who are you really, Jake Mercer?" "Someone who doesn't like seeing good people hurt," Jake replied, carefully setting the puppy back in the crate. "Someone who knows how to handle amateurs like Marcus Cole." He stood and walked to a locked footlocker near his bed. He opened it with a key from his pocket and pulled out a compact satellite phone. "We need to call this in. State police, FBI, whoever has jurisdiction." "We can't," Rachel said urgently. "Marcus has connections everywhere in the department. He's been there 8 years, built relationships with state patrol, the county prosecutor. If we call it in through normal channels, he'll know. He'll spin the story before we can get ahead of it. He'll make me look like the dirty cop." Jake considered this, his thumb hovering over the phone's power button. "Then we don't use normal channels." He pulled out a second phone from the locker, this one older, more rugged. He scrolled to a contact and placed the call. It was answered on the second ring. "Castle, it's Nomad," Jake said, using what Rachel recognized as a call sign. "I need a clean line to NCIS, priority flag. I have a witness to a law enforcement corruption case, possible interstate trafficking, and an active threat to said witness." He paused, listening. "Location is off-grid. I'll send coordinates. Subject is a Glacier County Lieutenant, Marcus Cole. I need a team I can trust, and I need them ready to move the moment this storm breaks." He listened for another moment, then said, "Understood, Nomad out." He ended the call and looked at Rachel. "Help is coming. But until it does, we hold this position. Cole doesn't know you're alive. That's our advantage. When he comes, we'll be ready." Rachel looked at this stranger who had saved her life, this man who made calls to NCIS with the casualness of someone ordering pizza, and she realized what he was. Jake Mercer wasn't just some hermit hiding in the mountains. He was a weapon, a very precise, very dangerous weapon. And for the first time since Marcus Cole had put his hands on her, Rachel felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The storm raged for 2 days. In that time, the cabin became a world unto itself. Jake Mercer and Rachel Morgan existed in a strange limbo, isolated from the outside world by walls of snow and wind, bound together by circumstance and shared purpose. They fell into a routine. Jake handled the heavy labor, splitting wood, maintaining the fire, shoveling pathways to the generator and the woodshed. Rachel, still recovering, focused on the puppies. They were growing stronger by the hour, their tiny bodies responding to warmth and regular feeding. Jake had a supply of puppy formula in his emergency stores, a remnant from a previous mission where he'd had to care for a war dog's litter. He'd kept it out of habit, the same habit that kept him alive in dangerous places. Odin had fully adopted his role as guardian. The big Malinois spent most of his time near the crate, his body a living wall between the puppies and any potential threat. When the pups were strong enough to stumble out of the crate, Odin would gently nudge them back in with his nose, his touch surprisingly delicate for such a powerful animal. Rachel watched the interaction with wonder. "He's incredible," she said, sitting on the floor beside the crate, her ribs taped and her pain managed by the medical supplies from Jake's extensive first aid kit. "I've worked with K9s for 5 years, but I've never seen one this focused. He's not a police dog," Jake said from the kitchen area, where he was preparing a simple meal of rice and canned chicken. "He's a military working dog. Different training, different purpose." "And you?" Rachel asked, her tone carefully neutral. "You're not just some guy on vacation." Jake brought over 2 plates and handed her one. "I'm on leave." "From?" "Work." Rachel smiled despite the pain in her jaw. "You're not going to tell me. It's not relevant to your situation. You called NCIS like you had them on speed dial. You have a satellite phone and enough medical supplies to stock a field hospital. You move like every step is calculated, like you're always expecting contact." She paused. "Your special operations." Jake sat down in his chair, his own plate balanced on his knee. "I'm someone who can help you. That's all that matters." It was a deflection, but Rachel let it go. She was learning that Jake Mercer was a man of few words and even fewer explanations. He existed in the present tense, focused on immediate problems with a singular intensity that was both comforting and slightly intimidating. But as the hours passed and they shared the close quarters of the cabin, small pieces of Jake's past began to emerge. Not in grand confessions, but in the small details that painted a picture of who he was. Late on the first night, as Rachel fed the puppies with careful, practiced movements, she noticed Jake staring into the fire, his expression distant. For once, the rigid control he maintained seemed to slip, revealing something raw beneath. "You said you lost men in Kandahar," Rachel said quietly. It wasn't really a question, more of an opening. Jake was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, without looking at her, he spoke. "2 of them. Daniels and Foster, good men, brothers." His voice was low, rough with suppressed emotion. "We were pulling out of a village after a successful op. Clean extraction, textbook. Then Daniels saw a kid, maybe 7 years old, running toward our convoy. He was screaming, waving his arms. Daniels called for a halt, said something was wrong. Jake's hands tightened on his mug of coffee. I overrode him. The kid was 50 meters out, no visible threat, and we had orders to maintain momentum. I told the convoy to keep moving." He paused, the silence heavy. The kid was a decoy. The real threat was an IED buried in the road 20 meters ahead. A spotter triggered it remotely when our lead vehicle crossed the kill zone. Foster was driving lead. Daniels was riding shotgun. They died instantly. Clean, if there's such a thing in war. The blast was so powerful, there wasn't much left to bring home. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty." Rachel felt tears sting her eyes, not just for the fallen soldiers, but for the man sitting across from her, carrying the weight of that decision like a physical burden. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "Wasn't it?" Jake's blue eyes finally met hers, and she saw the raw pain there. "I made the call. I overrode Daniels's instinct, a good operator's instinct, and 2 men died because I was following a timetable instead of trusting my team." "You couldn't have known." That's what they said at the inquiry. What my CO said. What the chaplain said. Doesn't change the fact that they're gone and I'm here. He set the mug down with careful precision. "That's why I came to these mountains, Rachel, to figure out if I still trust my own judgment, if I can still make the calls that keep people alive instead of getting them killed." "And can you?" Rachel asked. Jake looked at the 3 puppies sleeping peacefully in their crate, at Odin standing faithful watch, and finally at Rachel herself, battered but alive. "I pulled you out of that ravine. I'm keeping you alive until help arrives. So maybe—" He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the storm. "Or maybe I'm just trying to balance the scales." Rachel understood then. This wasn't just about her. It was about redemption. Jake Mercer had come to the mountains to escape his ghosts, but instead he'd found a mission that might let him make peace with them. On the second day, as the storm continued its assault, Jake began preparing the cabin for the confrontation he knew was coming. It wasn't paranoia, it was tactical reality. Marcus Cole would come, and when he did, Jake intended to be ready. He started by creating fallback positions. The cabin had 3 main areas: the open living space with the fire, a small kitchen alcove, and the back room where he'd stored his more sensitive equipment. He reinforced the back room's door with additional bracing, creating a safe room that could withstand significant force. "If things go bad," he explained to Rachel as he worked, "you take the puppies and seal yourself in there. The door is solid oak, backed with steel plating. It'll buy you time." "And you?" Rachel asked, watching him move with efficient purpose. "I'll be making sure they never get to that door." He showed her the satellite phone, making her memorize the emergency number for NCIS. "If I go down, if something happens to me, you call this number. Tell them Nomad is compromised and you need immediate extraction. They'll come." Rachel wanted to argue, to insist she could fight alongside him, but she knew it would be futile. This was what Jake had trained his entire adult life to do. She would be a liability in the kind of close-quarters combat he was preparing for. Instead, she focused on what she could control. She cleaned and checked her service weapon, which Jake had retrieved from her duty belt. She practiced moving from the main room to the back room, timing herself, memorizing the path even in darkness. She worked through the pain in her ribs, pushing her body to remember its training. Jake watched her practice runs with approval. "You're tougher than you look," he observed. "I have to be," Rachel replied, chambering a round in her Glock and then clearing it. "Women in law enforcement, we learn early that showing weakness gets you killed or stuck behind a desk. You fight through it or you quit." "Cole made a mistake," Jake said. "He assumed weakness because you're smaller, because you're a woman. He beat you, tied you up, and threw you away like garbage. But you survived, and now you're going to make him pay for that mistake." There was something in his tone, a cold certainty that sent a chill down Rachel's spine. This wasn't bravado, it was a statement of fact. Marcus Cole had signed his own warrant the moment he'd left her to die. That evening, as they shared another simple meal, Rachel asked the question that had been building in her mind. "After this is over, after Cole is arrested and the evidence is processed, what will you do?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Go back, I suppose. The Navy still has uses for me. There are always missions, always threats that need addressing." "But you don't want to," Rachel said, reading the reluctance in his voice. "I don't know what I want," Jake admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability. "I've been a SEAL for 16 years. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. But after Kandahar, after losing Daniels and Foster, I started questioning whether I still belong in that world." He looked at Odin, who was watching them both with intelligent amber eyes. We were built for war, him and me. Trained, conditioned, deployed. We're good at it. Maybe too good. But what happens to warriors when there's no war? When the missions end and you're left with the silence? You find a new mission, Rachel said quietly. You find people who need protecting. You use what you've learned to make the world a little bit better instead of just a little less bad. Jake met her eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. Two people who had both seen the darkness and chose to fight against it anyway. Maybe, Jake said, or maybe I just needed to remember that saving lives matters as much as taking them, that the skills I have can be used for more than destruction. The moment was broken by Odin's low growl. The dog stood, his body rigid, his ears forward. He was staring at the door, every muscle tensed. Jake was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the rifle that was never far from reach. Contact, he said quietly. But it was too soon. The storm was still raging. No one should be out in this. Jake moved to the window, using his thermal monocular to scan the tree line. Nothing. No heat signatures. No movement. Odin growled again, his focus unwavering. Then Jake saw it. Not on the thermal scope, but with his own eyes. A faint orange glow in the distance, visible through the swirling snow. It was too steady to be natural, too controlled. Fire, he breathed. Someone's lit a signal fire. Rachel joined him at the window, her face pale. Marcus? Maybe? Or maybe someone else is lost out there. Jake grabbed his cold weather gear. I need to check it out. You can't go out in this, Rachel protested. The storm is the only reason they're not already here, Jake interrupted. If that's a signal fire, it means someone's close. I need to know who and why. He began dressing with practiced speed, pulling on layers, checking his weapons. You know the drill. Lock the door behind me. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, you seal yourself in the back room and wait for NCIS. Jake. He paused at the door, looking back at her. His expression was calm, resolved. I won't let anyone hurt you, Rachel. That's a promise. But I need to control the situation before it controls us. Then he was gone, disappearing into the white chaos with Odin at his side, leaving Rachel alone with 3 sleeping puppies and a growing sense of dread that the storm was about to break in more ways than one. Outside, Jake moved through the blizzard with Odin, ranging ahead, following the faint glow of the fire. The cold was brutal, but he'd operated in worse. Afghanistan. In winter. The Arctic Circle during a training exercise that had gone sideways. He knew how to function when the environment itself was trying to kill you. The fire resolved itself as he got closer. It was a small, controlled blaze, built in a natural depression that protected it from the worst of the wind. And standing beside it, warming their hands, were 2 figures in heavy winter gear. Not Marcus Cole. These were civilians, a man and a woman, their faces gaunt with cold and exhaustion. Jake approached with his rifle at low ready, Odin positioned defensively beside him. Federal agent, he called out, the lie coming easily. It was simpler than explaining what he actually was. Identify yourselves. The man turned, his face lighting with relief. Thank God. We've been lost for 2 days. Our snowmobile broke down about 3 miles from here. We've been trying to signal for help. Jake studied them with a practiced eye, looking for the tells that would indicate threat. But these were just lost tourists, unprepared for the severity of the storm, lucky to be alive. There's a cabin about a 1/4 mile that direction, Jake said, pointing. You can make it if you move now. There's a woman there, a deputy sheriff. Tell her Jake sent you. She'll let you in and get you warm. Aren't you coming? The woman asked, her teeth chattering. I need to secure the area. Go. Now. They didn't need to be told twice. They gathered their meager supplies and started trudging toward the cabin, following Jake's directions. Jake watched them go, then turned to Odin. Search, he commanded, gesturing toward the wider perimeter. If Cole was out here, if he'd used the storm as cover to approach, Odin would find him. The dog began a systematic sweep of the area, his nose working despite the brutal wind. Jake followed, his senses on high alert, every shadow a potential threat. They found nothing. No tracks other than those of the lost couple. No heat signatures. No indication that Marcus Cole had made his move. Not yet. Jake returned to the cabin to find Rachel had let the couple inside and was providing them with warm drinks and blankets. They were effusive in their gratitude, babbling about how they'd thought they were going to die, how they'd never been so cold. Jake let Rachel handle them, instead positioning himself by the window, watching the storm, waiting. The attack would come. It was just a question of when. And when it did, Jake Mercer would be ready. On the morning of the third day, the wind finally died. The sudden silence was almost shocking after the constant roar. Jake stood at the window, watching the pre-dawn light turn the snow-covered landscape into a study of gray and white. "It's over," he said. "The storm?" Rachel asked, moving carefully to stand beside him. The lost couple had been evacuated by helicopter at first light, grateful and unaware of the larger drama playing out. "Yes," which means Cole's window just opened. As if summoned by the words, the satellite phone on Jake's belt chirped. He answered immediately. "Nomad." A crisp, professional voice came through the speaker. "Castle here. Your support package is wheels up from Malmstrom in 15. ETA to your location 90 minutes. Air assets on standby. What's the situation on the ground?" Jake glanced at Rachel, then back out at the pristine, deceptive beauty of the post-storm landscape. "Quiet. Too quiet. Subject Cole will make his move soon. He'll use official search and rescue as cover." "Understood. Your team lead is Supervisory Agent Sarah Chen, NCIS. She's solid. You can trust her." "Copy that. We'll hold position and wait for contact." He ended the call and turned to Rachel. "They're coming. We just have to survive until they get here." "And if Marcus arrives first?" Rachel asked, though she already knew the answer from the cold determination in Jake's eyes. "Then we make him regret it." Marcus Cole was a man who believed in preparation. As he stood in the snow outside the Glacier County Sheriff's Department, overseeing the loading of search and rescue equipment into 2 department SUVs, he looked every inch the concerned, dedicated officer. His uniform was crisp. His face was drawn with worry. To anyone watching, he was a commanding officer, desperate to find his missing deputy. In reality, he was executing the final phase of a cleanup operation. "Are we ready?" he asked Deputy Tom Garrison, a young, eager officer who worshipped Marcus like a hero. "Yes, sir. Search grid is programmed, medical supplies are loaded, and I've got the sat phone in case we need to call for air support." "Good. Let's move out." As they drove toward the remote logging road where he'd staged Rachel's disappearance, Marcus ran through the scenario in his mind. They'd find the vehicle in the ravine. They'd find Rachel's body, frozen, preserved by the cold. Tragic accident. Unstable officer. Case closed. The evidence she'd gathered would be buried under 10 feet of snow, lost forever. He would mourn her publicly. He'd give a speech at her funeral. He'd establish a scholarship in her name, and life would continue. The road was barely passable even with 4-wheel drive, but they made it to the trailhead where he'd last seen Rachel alive. Marcus parked and stepped out, scanning the tree line with practiced concern. She was responding to a call about a stranded hiker, he explained to Garrison, keeping his voice heavy with false worry. This was the last location on her GPS before the storm hit. The ravine is about half a mile northeast. That's where we'll focus the search. They gathered their gear and began the trek. The snow was deep, nearly waist-high in places, but Marcus knew the terrain. He'd scouted it carefully before luring Rachel here. They reached the embankment and began the careful descent into the ravine. What Marcus saw made his blood run cold. The SUV was there, nose down in the snow, exactly where he'd shoved it. But the driver's side door was open, hanging at an angle. The interior was empty. And in the pristine snow leading away from the vehicle was a clear trail. Boot prints, large ones, and paw prints. A dog, but not one of the puppies, something much bigger. "Sir?" Garrison's voice was uncertain. "There's tracks. It looks like someone pulled her out." Marcus's mind raced. Impossible. The nearest cabin was miles away. No one should have been out in that storm. But the evidence was undeniable. Rachel was gone. Someone had found her. Someone had saved her. "Radio back to the station. Marcus said, his voice controlled despite the panic clawing at his chest. "Tell them we've found Deputy Morgan's vehicle but no sign of her. We're going to follow the tracks. They lead northeast." As Garrison made the call, Marcus stared at the trail in the snow. He could follow it. He should follow it. But something made him hesitate. The boot prints were large, deliberate, the stride of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The paw prints belonged to a trained working dog, not a pet. Whoever had Rachel was capable, maybe too capable. Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his personal phone, scrolling to a contact saved only as Denver. The call was answered immediately. "I have a situation," Marcus said quietly. The package wasn't eliminated. Someone pulled her out. "I need your team here. Now." The voice on the other end was flat, professional. "Location?" Marcus rattled off the coordinates. "How soon?" 2 hours. "And Marcus? This is your last cleanup. After this we're done. You understand?" "Understood." Marcus ended the call and turned back to Garrison. "Change of plans. We're going to wait here for additional resources. I want air support before we proceed." "But sir, if Deputy Morgan is out there, every minute counts." "I'm aware of that, Deputy," Marcus snapped. "But if she's been injured and rescued by a civilian, we don't want to stumble into a situation we're not prepared for. We wait for backup." Garrison looked confused but nodded. He didn't understand that the backup Marcus was waiting for had nothing to do with rescue and everything to do with eliminating a witness who should have been dead 3 days ago. Jake knew they were coming before he saw them. Odin's behavior changed subtly, his ears swiveling toward the west, his body tensing. The dog moved to the door and let out a low, sustained growl. "Contact," Jake said calmly. Rachel, who had been feeding the puppies, immediately stood and moved to the back room where Jake had established a fallback position. He'd drilled her on this. If things went bad, she was to take the puppies, seal herself in the reinforced back room, and wait for NCIS to arrive. "How many?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear Jake could see in her eyes. "Don't know yet." He moved to the window, using a small mirror to check the approach without exposing himself. Odin's alert suggests multiple contacts. Could be official, search and rescue. Could be Cole's cleanup crew. The sound of engines reached them, high-pitched and mechanical. Snowmobiles. 2 of them, maybe 3. "It's him," Rachel breathed. "He's coming." Jake pulled his rifle from where it leaned against the wall, checking the chamber with practiced ease. "Get in the back room, lock the door. Don't come out until I give you the all-clear or until NCIS arrives. Jake, go." Rachel gathered the 3 puppies, who whined in protest at being moved from their warm crate. She disappeared into the back room. Jake heard the heavy deadbolt slide home. He turned to Odin. "Ready position." The Malinois immediately moved to a spot Jake had prepared, a low position behind the heavy oak table that would provide cover while giving the dog a clear line of attack if needed. The snowmobile's engines grew louder, then cut off. Jake heard boots crunching in the snow, multiple pairs, moving with tactical spacing. These weren't amateurs. Through the mirror, he saw 3 figures approaching the cabin. All wore heavy winter gear. 2 carried rifles, professional grade, not hunting weapons. The 3rd figure was Marcus Cole. Even bundled in winter gear, Jake recognized him from the description Rachel had given. Average height, athletic build, moving with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled the situation. A voice called out, amplified by the cold air. "Hello, the cabin. This is Lieutenant Marcus Cole, Glacier County Sheriff's Department. We're conducting a search and rescue operation. We have reason to believe Deputy Rachel Morgan may have sought shelter here. We need to come inside and check on her welfare." Jake didn't answer. He watched through the mirror as Cole's 2 companions spread out, flanking the cabin. They moved well, maintaining sight lines and cover. Ex-military, Jake assessed. Probably private. Contractors. "Sir," Cole called again, "I need you to open the door. This is an active law enforcement operation. If you're harboring Deputy Morgan, you need to release her into our custody immediately." Still, Jake remained silent. He could play this several ways. He could pretend to be an innocent civilian, let them breach, try to talk his way out. But that would put Rachel at risk. These men weren't here to rescue her. They were here to finish what Cole had started. Or he could make his own statement. Jake opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, his rifle held at low ready, finger off the trigger, but ready to engage. Odin moved with him, taking up a position at his left heel, his entire body radiating controlled aggression. "That's far enough," Jake said, his voice carrying easily across the snow. His tone was calm, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. "This is private property. You're not coming inside." Cole's expression flickered, surprise and calculation warring on his face. He'd expected a frightened civilian or an empty cabin. What he got was a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same granite as the mountains around them, holding a rifle with the ease of long familiarity, backed by a dog that looked capable of tearing out throats. "Sir, I don't think you understand the situation," Cole began, his voice taking on a harder edge. "I am conducting an official search for a woman you tried to murder," Jake interrupted, his voice flat and cold. "Deputy Rachel Morgan. You beat her, zip-tied her hands, and pushed her vehicle into a ravine. You left her and 3 8-week-old puppies to freeze to death. And now you're here to make sure the job gets finished." The silence that followed was absolute. Cole's face went from confident concern to cold calculation in an instant. His 2 contractors shifted, their rifles coming up slightly. "I don't know what Deputy Morgan has told you," Cole said, dropping the pretense. "Entirely. But you're interfering in a law enforcement matter. That woman is under investigation for corruption. She's unstable, dangerous, and she's lied to you." "Actually," Jake said, "she's inside, alive and well, with all the evidence she collected on your smuggling operation. And in about 30 minutes, a team from NCIS is going to land here and take her into protective custody. You have 2 choices. You can turn around, drive away, and maybe get a head start before they issue the warrant. Or you can try to breach this cabin." He paused, his eyes locked on Cole's. "I really hope you try to breach." One of the contractors, the larger of the 2, stepped forward. "You threatening us?" "No," Jake said. "I'm giving you information so you can make an informed decision. But I'll add this. I'm a Navy SEAL. I've held positions in Fallujah, Kandahar, and a dozen other places you've never heard of. This cabin is a tactical strong point, and that dog at my feet has a higher body count than both your contractors combined. You breach this door, and the only thing you're going to accomplish is giving NCIS 3 more bodies to process." The standoff hung in the cold air, brittle and explosive. Cole's eyes moved from Jake to the cabin to his contractors and back. He was doing the math. A trained SEAL. Fortified position, air support, incoming. The odds weren't in his favor, but Jake could see the desperation in his eyes. Cole had already crossed too many lines to turn back now. He was all in. "Take him," Cole said quietly. The 2 contractors raised their rifles. Jake and Odin moved simultaneously. Jake dropped to one knee, bringing his rifle up as he pivoted right. Odin launched himself forward like a missile, covering the 15 feet to the nearest contractor in less than 2 seconds. The first contractor got off a single shot that went wide, punching into the cabin's log wall. Then 80 pounds of trained combat dog hit him in the chest, jaws locking onto his gun arm. The man screamed, his rifle dropping into the snow. Jake engaged the second contractor with 3 precise shots. He wasn't aiming to kill, not yet. He put 1 round into the snow at the man's feet, forcing him to dive for cover behind a snow berm. The second and third rounds chewed up the snow inches from where the man had landed. Cole was scrambling for his own sidearm, but he was too slow. Jake pivoted, bringing his rifle to bear on the lieutenant. "Don't," Jake said. The single word carried absolute authority. Cole froze, his hand on his holstered weapon. "Face down in the snow, hands behind your head, now." For a moment, Jake thought Cole might actually try to draw. The man's face was a mask of rage and desperation, but survival instinct won out. Cole slowly lowered himself to the snow, putting his hands behind his head. The contractor Odin had taken down was whimpering, his arm badly mauled, but not life-threatening. The dog had released him at Jake's command, and now stood over him, growling, ready to re-engage if the man moved. The second contractor, pinned behind the berm, called out, "I'm done! I'm not moving!" "Smart," Jake replied. "Stay there." The sound of helicopters reached them, growing rapidly louder. Two Black Hawks appeared over the ridgeline, moving fast and low. They flared over the clearing, and Jake could see the NCIS tactical team visible in the open doors. The cavalry had arrived. Supervisory Special Agent Sarah Chen was a woman who inspired immediate confidence. She was 45, compact and efficient, with sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. She stepped out of the first helicopter with the ease of someone who'd made 1,000 tactical insertions, her NCIS raid jacket bright against the snow. She took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. 3 suspects face down in the snow, one with visible dog-bite injuries, Jake Mercer standing watch with his rifle and his war dog, and the cabin behind him intact and secure. "Commander, Mercer," she said, approaching with her hand extended. "Castle gave me your file. Hell of a file. Thanks for keeping our witness alive." "Agent Chen," Jake replied, accepting the handshake. He wasn't surprised she knew his rank. When NCIS started digging, they dug deep. "The witness is secure inside. She has the evidence." "Outstanding. Let's get these 3 processed and get Deputy Morgan somewhere safe." The next hour was a blur of controlled activity. The NCIS team secured Marcus Cole and his 2 contractors, reading them their rights while treating the injured man's arm. Rachel emerged from the cabin, carrying the 3 puppies in a blanket-lined box, Odin walking protectively at her side. The moment Sarah Chen saw her, the bruises still visible on her face despite days of healing, her expression hardened. "Deputy Morgan, I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen. You're safe now. We're going to take you and your evidence into protective custody. Lieutenant Cole and his associates are going to turn federal detention." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "The evidence is in the collar of the smallest puppy. It's a micro SD card sewn into the lining." Sarah carefully retrieved the tiny drive, holding it up to the light. "This is it? This is what he tried to kill you for?" "It's everything," Rachel said. "Bank transfers, shipping manifests, communications. Enough to bring down his entire operation." Sarah looked at the tiny piece of technology, then at the 3 helpless puppies, then at the broken, defeated man sitting handcuffed in the snow. "He really didn't search the dogs. He's an amateur," Jake said, echoing his earlier assessment. Marcus Cole, being loaded into the helicopter, turned his head to stare at Rachel. For a moment, pure hatred burned in his eyes. Then the door closed, and he was gone. 3 weeks later, the snow in Montana was beginning its slow retreat, revealing the brown grass and gray stone beneath. Jake Mercer stood on the porch of his cabin, watching the sunrise paint the peaks in shades of gold and pink. The storm season was ending. Soon the mountains would be green again. Odin lay at his feet, content and relaxed. Inside, the cabin was quiet. Jake had extended his leave, not indefinitely, but long enough to see this through. He'd testified before the federal grand jury, providing his first-hand account of the attempted murder and the subsequent confrontation. Marcus Cole and his contractors were facing enough federal charges to put them away for decades. The smuggling ring had been dismantled, with arrests spanning 3 states. Rachel Morgan had been cleared of any wrongdoing and had become something of a hero within law enforcement circles. She'd accepted a position with a federal task force, taking her K9 expertise to a larger stage. The 3 puppies had become minor celebrities. All 3 were being raised and trained by Rachel herself under a special program to develop them into elite detection dogs. She visited regularly, bringing the growing pups to see their Uncle Odin. It was during one of these visits, a sunny afternoon in early March, that Rachel asked the question Jake had known was coming. "What will you do, after your leave ends?" They were sitting on the porch, watching the puppies, now gangly adolescents, play in the melting snow. Odin supervised with patient dignity, occasionally intervening when play got too rough. "Go back," Jake said. "Eventually, the Navy still has uses for me." "You could do something else," Rachel suggested. "With your skills, you could train protection dogs, work private security, teach tactics." "Maybe," Jake said. "Someday." Rachel turned to look at him, her healed face serious. "You saved my life. You could have died out there, pulling me from that ravine. Why did you really do it?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching the mountains, watching the dogs, watching the slow return of life to the frozen world. "Because someone once told me that the measure of a warrior isn't what he's willing to die for," he finally said. "It's what he's willing to live for. I've spent my whole career perfecting how to destroy things, how to end threats, how to survive impossible situations. But pulling you out of that ravine, keeping you alive, stopping coal that wasn't about destruction, that was about preservation. That was about making sure the good guys win for once." He looked at her, his blue eyes clear and calm. "That's a mission I can believe in." Rachel nodded slowly, understanding. She reached over and squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture of gratitude that needed no words. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, warming the world, melting the last of the storm away. The puppies played. Odin watched. And Jake Mercer, warrior and protector, allowed himself a small moment of peace. The mountains had tried to bury the truth in a storm. But some truths, once brought into the light, can never be buried again. If the story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist in this world. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it Odin's loyalty, Jake's protective courage, or Rachel's determination to see justice served? We read every comment, and your words mean the world to us. May God bless you and keep you safe. May He place protectors on your path when you need them most, and may He give you the courage to stand up for what's right when the storms of life try to bury the truth. If you believe in divine protection and the power of one person to make a difference, please type Amen in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.